And welcome to another episode of Stuck in Mind Podcast. I'm your host, WIZE. I'm excited for my next guest. She's a best-selling author, and I'm just excited for her to tell us her story. Welcome to the show, Liz Mugavero.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. Pleasure's all mine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's hot here in Boston. It's like 90 degrees.
I won't hold that against you. I'm a Yankees fan.
Oh, of course. I hope that doesn't mean you're going to be mean.
No. I won't hold it against you. But I'm excited to have you here. Yeah, like I said, you're a best-selling author. What inspired you to start writing mystery novels, and how did you discover your passion for crime fiction?
Yeah, I've always been obsessed with crime. I mean, ever since I was little, I started out with Nancy Drew and all the things. I was always a big reader. So my parents weren't alarmed when I was very excited about Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. But as I got older and started to be obsessed with serial killers and, all kinds of other crime and horror, they were a little worried, especially when I had a poster of Freddy Krueger on my bedroom door. But my grandfather was a detective, in my defense. And even though his stories were pretty G-rated at the time, because I was still fairly young when he retired, he used to tell me a lot of things about what he did, and it was very interesting to me. And so I think he gave me the storytelling bug, and he gave me the crime-loving bug.
Okay. So can you share your story behind your first Positively Organic Mystery, Needing to Die, and its Agatha Award nomination?
Yeah. So I had been working like I said, I always knew I wanted to be a writer and write books. And so I went to Emerson College here and got a graduate degree in writing and publishing. And then I came out of school and I was like, I'm not really sure what to do next. And so that's when I decided I had written a novel as my thesis. It was not a mystery. And that's when I realized, I love to read mysteries, so I should be writing them. So I started researching crime writer conferences, and there was actually one here in my backyard. And so I registered for it, and then I started writing. And at the time I was writing a series that is as yet unpublished, but it took place in a funeral home, because I have a very good friend who runs funeral homes. And so another thing I'm fascinated with is how funeral homes run behind the scenes. So I'm like, well, let's just write a crime story that takes place in a funeral home. So I started there, and I worked for about 10 years of writing books, pitching, going to conferences, networking, joining groups, making friends, making connections. And then I had joined Sisters in Crime, which is a international organization. And I had joined our local chapter here in the Boston area. And an agent had reached out to that organization and asked for recommendations on writers who might be willing to work on proposals with him. And so she put the ask out to the whole community. And I was one of the people who responded. And so I talked to this agent, and we came up with a concept for a cozy mystery, which he was, at the time, the cozy mysteries were huge. And so he was selling a lot of them. So he wanted to expand his repertoire. So we came up with the concept of a corporate girl turned gourmet pet food chef, who moved to a small town and, started taking her hobby of baking and cooking for her cat to the next level, and also finding lots of dead people and murders to solve. So that was my first novel that was published in 2013. It was nominated for an Agatha Award for Best First. I like to say, after 10 years of working really hard, it kind of happened overnight, because this conversation with the agent happened in, September of 2011. And by December, I had a contract. So.
Awesome. So, many writers have this. They have their name, and then they also have a pseudonym where they write under another name. Well, what's the differentiate between the personas of Liz and Cate Conte?
Yeah, so the reason I have a pseudonym, because the series that I write under my real name and the other two series that I write under Cate Conte are very similar. They're all cozy mysteries. But the reason for the pseudonym was because my second series, which is the Cat Cafe Mysteries, which is still running, that was with a different publisher. So they had asked for a different name. So I had come up with the name Cate Conte. Conte's my grandfather's last name. I thought that was very fitting. And so then my third series, the Full Moon Mysteries, was published back with my first publisher, but they wanted to use the Cate Conte name because the sales for that series were good. And so they asked if they could use it. So
Okay.
it's different authors have different, some people choose to have pseudonyms for different series. This
Yeah.
just happened. If I move to writing in another genre, there might be a different name for that. We'll see, but there's many different reasons for pseudonyms.
So what drew you to incorporate pets, particularly cats, into your mystery series?
Yeah, I'm a huge animal person, and I did animal rescue for many years, like 25 years. I had to actually take a break a couple years ago when I moved back to Boston, but I did a ton of cat rescue from the time I left grad school back when I was in my early 20s to again just a few years ago, and it's just part of who I am. I love animals. I ended up getting some dogs along the way also. Currently, I have 2 rescue dogs, and actually my very last rescue cat that was from, all those years of doing rescue just passed away like 6 months ago. So it was, it's just something that's near and dear to my heart. And I thought, one of the things I wanted to do with all of my series and all of the things I write is to make it about something. That was good advice I got from another crime author, Dennis Lehane. He always talks about how whatever you're writing, make your books about something. And I saw an opportunity, especially with the desire to have pets involved in cozy mysteries, to not only put cute pets in there, but also educate people on good nutrition for pets, how animal rescue actually works, what dog transport's really like, and, things like that. So
What are some of the inspirations behind your Cat Cafe mysteries and the Full Moon mysteries?
yeah, so the Cat Cafe Mysteries, that was an interesting iteration of how that came about. So the publisher had an editor at my publishing house had approached my agent at the time and said, "We need a series about cats," because that was a big thing back then. And he said, "Well, I know just the person." So of course he came to me because I was starting to get known as the cat lady because of my other series. And so we talked about what this might look like. And she really wanted what she called a cat about town mystery. And so I was kind of like, I don't know what that means exactly. Like, what's the cat going to do about town? And so it went through a lot of conversation and discussion and iterations of what that would look like. And eventually, after we had an idea, I'd started writing the book. It was set on a fictional version of Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off the coast of Massachusetts. And I had already started writing the book, and she came back and said, "I think this would be great if it was a cat cafe." And I said, "That would be really fun, but cat cafes are usually in cities. There's more people, there's more, chances that people are going to live in an apartment or places where they can't have pets, so they can go to the cat cafe and visit the cats." So she was like, "Well, I still think it's a great idea, so let's figure out how to do it." And so I had to figure out how to get a cat cafe to make sense on an island. So I did that. I partnered in my book. I had my main character, Maddie James, partner with the animal rescue person on the island, because the other is, so she's the ACO, the animal control officer, and the local cat rescue had just closed down, and she needed help with all the cats on the island, the stray cats. And so I created the Cat Cafe to kind of help with the rescue opportunities on the island, and just factored it into Maddie's family situation and had her grandfather end up helping her run the Cat Cafe.
Awesome. So how does your background in public relations and business also influence your writing career?
Yeah, so I've been working in some form of marketing communications for, the past almost 20 years. Before that, I was a journalist. I think of all the jobs I've had and all the work I've done, being a journalist has been the one that's really directed the way I work, because first of all, you learn to be good with deadlines, which is super important. You don't want to turn your books in late. You can't turn your articles in late when you're working for a newspaper. And then, just the marketing aspect of what I've been doing all this time, it helps me market my own books. Working in communications, I love that part of what I do, because I have the opportunity often to work with many different people and write for them. So I'm writing in different voices all the time and, learning people's style, which also helps me when I'm creating different characters. It gives me something to draw back on, which is very cool.
Excuse me. Um, what challenges did you? Excuse me. What challenges did you face in finding your creative mojo, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. So a lot of creatives, I think, get the message early on in life from people who obviously don't mean them any harm, but just are maybe worried about their well-being. But people get the message that doing art is not a way to make a living and that you're going to have a backup plan, right? So I learned or I heard early on from my family that, that's great that you want to be a writer, but also I think you should be a teacher or, whatever else they recommended in order for me to not be homeless on the street. And so so I think you start to internalize those messages, even though I knew I didn't believe them and even though I knew there was a way to do it, you still kind of internalize what you're hearing, especially from the people who you look up to. And so I think that really stuck with me for a long time. And I was writing and working and trying to move my career forward. And I was very stuck for a while. And I was doing things, but I wasn't making progress. I hadn't fully discovered my authentic voice. I didn't really know how to find it, I felt at the time. And so someone handed me a copy of The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, which is basically a creative recovery program. And I did the work in the book and I started to really look at the things that were ingrained in my brain that were keeping me from doing what I wanted to do and making myself successful at it. And it's a book that you work, you don't just read it. And the work takes a long time and often you have to do it multiple times because I always say this creative work journey is never done because it's like an onion, right? Once you peel off the first layer, you start to find more things you have to deal with. And so it's been a long journey of trying to figure out exactly who I am as a writer, what it is that I want to write, how to keep my mindset such that it supports me in what I'm trying to do. Even when it's challenging or, you feel like those old messages keep coming back in your head. So it's been a process. It's still ongoing, but definitely worth it to really do the inner work to get you to really expand your creativity and recognize it.
Okay, all right. So, how do you balance the darker elements of crime fiction with the cozy and whimsical aspects of your stories?
Yeah, so cozies are, they're so interesting because people love them for many reasons. They love them because they're murders, but they also have the ability to make you still feel like you're, part of a community, you're invested in the people. Cozies are always serious, so people want to come back to your town and to your community over and over again if you're doing it well. And so there's always a murder or two in a book. And so you have to really, think about how you're going to show that to people, but also keep the integrity of the town. And so the thing about cozies is the violence is not happening on the page, right? So there's a dead body, but you don't see them being murdered. You don't see a lot of blood. You don't see a lot of gore. You don't hear a lot of bad language or usually any bad language or anything like that. So it's showing the severity of what happened, but focusing more on the characters and the investigation and how the town is, coming together and figuring out who actually did this thing. And then the most important part is restoring the town to justice at the end. Because I think that's ultimately what people want. They want to walk away feeling good about what happened. Even if there was a tragedy, they know that the town overcame it, and then they're going to feel good about coming back next time.
Okay. Um, also, how does your spirituality and woo woo play in your writing process and creative coaching?
Yeah, so I am a huge woo-woo girl, which people kind of say it tongue in cheek, and it's kind of funny, but also it's real. So I love crystals. There's all that kind of thing, right? So the crystals and the essential oils and all the real quote woo-woo stuff.
Yeah.
But also when I think of that as a practice, I'm thinking of meditation, I'm thinking of journaling, all the things that, again, bring you more in touch with who you are and help
Yeah.
you bring out your actual creativity. And so my full moon mysteries that we had mentioned briefly before, so they're paranormal cozy. So they take place in a fictional Connecticut town. And my character at the beginning of the series, she runs a crystal shop, and she can see people's auras, but she doesn't realize she just thinks it's something she can do. What she doesn't realize is that she's actually a witch. And so her long lost family comes to town and tells her that she's a witch, and she's involved in a murder and all of the things. So, having the crystals as a way into that, I thought was really interesting because she in her store, she would do what she called crystal consults. So people would come in with a problem. She would figure out what crystals they needed, and she would diagnose them and give them a packet of crystals. And so it was a fun way for me to kind of take tools that have worked for me and that I really love. I love crystals. I think they're beautiful, and I think they really do have healing properties. So it was a fun way for me to take that and put it in a book, and also educate people on the power of healing crystals.
Oh, I'm believe me, I believe in a lot of, and my first wife, she was very spiritual and very into just she just believed in crystals, and because her stepfather, a former hippie, he was into crystals and all different things, and so being around him also showed me that it's just there's more to it. There's more to this world than what we see. So
Yeah.
I kind of understand what you're talking about.
I love that.
So also, how did your grandfather's career as a detective, I guess you kind of touched on that, influence your well, you did touch on it. Your grandfather said, like you said, he was a police officer and his stories, like you said, inspired you and got you into loving crime and murder mysteries and stuff like that. Would you how do you feel? How would you kind of, I don't know how to put this. How do you think? Because like you said, he kept it PG. So do you think him keeping it PG kind of influenced you in how you're writing the stories? Because like you said, you don't write the gore and the blood and all that. The way he told the stories, did it have a kind of influence on how you wanted to tell your stories?
So that's an interesting question, and definitely I was the kid who always wanted to know more.
Yeah.
So he'd be like, "Well, I had to chase this guy down the street and fire my gun." And I'm like, well, "What happened then? Did you hit him? What did he?" All of this. So I've always been a little bit on the darker side of things. So just ask my parents. But that is an interesting question, because I think what I took from his, well, let me back up and just say, cozies have a certain way of telling the story, right? That's expected by the readers. So they don't want to read the gore, right? They don't want to pick up a cozy and then, find somebody being stabbed 17 times. That's not what they want. So there is a certain expectation when you're writing a cozy that you tell it in a certain way. But I will say my grandfather's humor about everything, from his job to, the mundane things that happened every day, definitely, sorry, my phone's ringing, definitely influenced how, definitely influenced how I like to write, as far as just finding the humor in things that don't necessarily ask for humor, right? And because there are, and I also learned this from a good friend of mine, my friend that runs the funeral homes. There's always a place and a time for humor, and it's important to have it even in serious situations. And so my grandfather definitely taught me that. And also Grandpa Leo, who's a character in my Cat Cafe series, is kind of loosely based on my grandfather. I don't think that my grandfather would have run a cat cafe with me, but he certainly would have been amused by it and can come by to visit and see what was going on. So I like to think having Grandpa in the story is kind of my homage to him.
Awesome. Can you explain the concept and goals of the Creativity Lab and how it helps aspiring writers?
Yeah. So I started this idea maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and just have kind of been iterating on it ever since. But after spending so much time in the publishing industry and at conferences and meeting people who are just starting out, and remembering how I felt when I was just starting out and what I didn't know, and all the things that trip you up, like your own mindset. And then kind of thinking about the work I've been doing with creative recovery and continuing that journey. It really felt, I felt strongly that people, especially newer people starting out, needed to have the time and the space to honor their creativity and get their work done, and have the support of a community, have accountability to somebody. Because it's easy to say, I'm going to write a book, and then never do anything about it, right? And if you're serious about it, and if you want to carve out some time for it, and if you want the support of people behind you cheering you on, that's really what I wanted to do with my Creativity Lab membership. And so we do a bunch of things in it, but the biggest thing is we meet multiple times a week. There's co-writing sessions. So we hop on, we do a little bit of group coaching, we set a timer, we write for a certain amount of time, then we come back, do a little bit more, Q&A or coaching, whatever people need if they're stuck on things. And then we have a workbook every month that has it's based on a tarot card, and it's got journal exercises and fiction prompts to relating to the tarot card, to help people, give them a place to start if they are stuck maybe and want to, just kind of go off and start writing something different to get the juices flowing. It gives you a crystal to work with for the month. We have essential oils to work with for the month. So it's varied. There's a lot of fun things. I have guest speakers come in and talk about craft and talk about the business of writing. And so, yeah, it's really a community for people who want to focus their writing time and, honor themselves in that way.
So my next question is, what are some of the common creative blocks that writers face, and how do you kind of help them overcome these obstacles? You just mentioned crystals and everything. What else do you do?
Yeah, so a lot of I think the biggest problem people have is we all get in our own way, right? And again, going back to the stories in our heads, right? We hear stories from people about what we can achieve or what's realistic, or fill in the blank, and then we internalize those stories and we start telling them to ourselves. And so I think one of the biggest things that I want to bring to the table is the ability to do that mindset coaching with people, right? To help them see past the perceived limitations that they have, to realize that I think if you have a calling to write anything, then it means you're supposed to write it. And so you have almost an obligation to bring that to the world. And so I want to help people get to the place where they feel confident enough to be able to start writing. I want to help people find their voices. I want to give them the time and the space to write. And I want to give them the community that they need, right? Because writing's so solitary. We all need the community behind us.
Oh, and for those who were wondering why I had a cozy writer on and a murder mystery writer on, everything she just talked about, mindset, the communities, networking, all these things tie in together. So why I built the podcast was to have people come and share their stories and in all walks of life. You deal with writers and creatives, and so, but it's all ties in together. Everybody, it's all about growth mindset and having people. How do you block out what other people are saying and go with what you believe in? Because sometimes what people say does have an impact on what you're doing. So for those who were wondering why, this is why, because it all ties in together.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's so true. It's so true. We are our biggest problem sometimes,
Yeah,
right? We just can't get out of our own way.
absolutely. So how do you approach world building and character development in your mystery series?
Yeah,
I
I
know,
love world building.
I know you mentioned that one is basically your grandpa Leo is kind of homage to your grandfather. How do you figure other characters out?
Yeah. So a lot of people ask, are your characters you? They're never just me, or they're never just someone I know. But I do love to grab little pieces and characteristics of people and kind of mush them together. Usually my protagonists are, I really like to write about strong women. And so I like to write about women who are finding their way after maybe, going in a path that someone else set for them. That was definitely the case with my first series. My protagonist, Stan Connor, was doing the corporate thing. That was what she was supposed to do. She came from a fancy family and she hated every minute of it. And then they fired her and she had no choice but to start over again and figure out a better way to live her life that was more satisfying to her. And so my main characters are always strong women. And then the people I put around them, I like to have, I like to have a lot of different kinds of sidekicks. So Grandpa's one example. There's a guy also in my Cat Cafe series. His name is Leopard Man, and he came from, and he only speaks in Shakespeare. And so, and he's the quirky character on the island. People don't know what to make of him. They don't know if he's actually, like, if he lives on the street or if he, who he even is. He's just been this mystical figure forever. And so he actually came from a place I used to live. There was a man who, a very different situation, right? Because again, this is a cozy, so I had to make it family friendly. But there was a gentleman who lived in town, and he walked around town with leopard from head to toe clothing, from head to toe. I mean, from his hat, coat, clothes underneath, boots. He had a tail. He even had a tail. And I used to see him walking down the street, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to use this somehow because it's great. This dude is walking around with a tail. so he turned into Leopard Man, again, a family friendly version of Leopard Man. But, that's one example. And I like to, in my first series, again, with the rescue, I wanted to educate people on rescue, but I didn't want my main character to be preaching at people. That was not the way to do it. So she had a best friend who actually did the hands-on rescue, and she ran a dog transport. And so I was able to get that message in there through her friend versus having her like having to lecture everybody or tell them about, whatever it was that I wanted to get across to people based on that story. So that's how I usually come up with characters.
So, what piece of advice would you give to writers struggling to find their unique voice and style?
Yeah, I mean, I think every writer needs to read a lot, first of all, right? And read a lot and really pay attention to the kinds of books that you like, but don't copy them. That's not what I'm saying. But just pay a lot of attention to how the people write the book. So are they writing in multiple point of view? Are they writing in first person? Are they writing in third person? What are the things about the work that you like the best that strikes you? And then just start trying different things with your own writing. Because the only way you're going to find your own voice is to use it enough to let it emerge. And so using someone else's books as a starting point just to kind of find your footing is important. But only, just keep practicing, and that's how you're going to let your own voice come out.
Yeah, like at least for me in podcasting, I didn't really study many podcasters and stuff like that. But like there's certain ones that I would listen to and everything, but it took me just finally getting out of my own way and pressing record and just starting to record first, the whole process and everything.
Yeah.
And then eventually getting the courage to just even finding guests, because at first it was like difficult, because when you're just first starting out, all guests really care about is, oh, how many downloads do you get, or how many. I'm like, dude, I'm just starting out. I'm beginning, and so there was definitely a lot of struggle trying to get the guests. But once I started connecting with people and building networks and relationships, it's slowly but surely I started getting some quality guests, and in the process I also started building on how I wanted to go with the show. Because when I first started, it was me talking about what was going on in the world with politics, and it was the beginning of the pandemic, the George Floyd situation, elections, everything was going on, and I enjoyed the podcasting part. It was just the content I wasn't too happy with.
Yeah.
And so when I decided to go to more interview based and actually talk to people and have them share their story And that's when I really fell in love with it. This is when I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. This I want to be able to come and have a platform where people can share their stories, and hopefully people can listen to it and be like, wow, they're just regular people like us, and why can't I do something like that? And so it's been an amazing 4 years being able to do the podcast.
I love that example. I love that example because it's so true, right? I also have a class that I'm launching shortly. It's called the Mindful Mystery Writers Masterclass. And, while I definitely recommend that people learn the craft, like that's super important. I'm not saying you can't learn the craft,
Yeah,
but I do believe that the best way to learn how to write a book is to actually write a book.
yeah, yeah. How do you know if you can do it if you don't start?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
it is. It is. So, can you share a behind the scenes look at your writing routine and how you stay productive?
Yeah. I love this question. It changes a lot. For years I've written my books off the side of my desk because I've always had a day job or multiple jobs, So I had to really get scrappy about how to get the writing done, especially when I was writing 2 books a year, and having a full-time job. So I did a lot. I write best in the morning. So I would try my hardest to get up early in the morning. I journal every morning. That's kind of a non-negotiable thing for me. But I would try to journal and then always get in a few words, at least 500 words. If I was in the middle of a book or had a deadline coming up. Now, the past couple of years, my schedule's changed. I work for myself. Still doing marketing and communications work, but also, my books. So I've been playing around with different schedules and what works for me. I still like to write most in the morning, but I've tried to be a little bit more flexible also and try different things. And I think that's important for people too, because everyone loves to ask writers the question of like, what's your process? How many words a day do you write? When do you write? Where do you write? And all of that's awesome. And I ask writers that all the time too, because I love to just know what people are doing and how they're doing it and how it works for them. But just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And it took me so many years to figure that out. And so now I'm really trying to honor, like, even at different stages in my life when my life circumstances change and what's working best for me at the time. But the short answer is I do try to still write in the morning, do the majority of my writing in the morning. I am trying to write every day, even though I don't believe everyone has to write every day to be successful and productive at all. But that's the stage I'm in where I'm trying to do that because I'm working on 2 books. And I'm trying to get that done and out of the way in the morning and then move on to other work in the afternoon.
Okay, all right. How do you handle reader expectations and feedback, especially with the popularity of cozy mysteries?
Yeah, I love hearing from readers. I mean, I love their responses. I love feedback. I don't mind feedback at all. I do think it's so funny when, no matter how many times you read through a book and work on a book and your editor reads a book and the copy editor reads a book and all the people read a book, there's always a mistake in it. And I love the diehard people who will find that mistake and they will tell you. And so, um, and then I feel stupid because I'm like, oh, how many times did I read this book? I can't believe I made that mistake. But I welcome hearing from all readers. I love it, and it keeps me on my toes because now I'm like paranoid about certain things, and it makes me go back and triple check things that I feel like I've already looked at 100 times because I hate making mistakes. So, but I do love when I get, I've gotten such nice letters from people. I remember a recent one where someone wrote to me and said that their husband had been in the hospital and my book had kept her company while she was, sitting with him. And it just stuff like that it makes me remember why I wanted to do this.
Yeah, it's an amazing. It's even when I get messages from people, like early on when I first started, I did an interview with a high school friend of mine. He's a highly successful real estate agent in Brooklyn, and a friend of ours sent me a message after she heard our episode and was like, listening to you two guys talk and talk about growth mindset and manifestation and just self-development and goals and all this stuff. She said I had been on the fence about starting a business, and listening to two guys I know who are doing what they're doing, just kind of like showed me like, hey, these two guys are doing it. I know them personally. I grew up with them. What's the difference with me? What's stopping me?
Mm.
And it was again this, like you said, you're your worst you're your biggest worst enemy. You're always the one who's kind of holding you back from what you truly want to get accomplished. It, it's still applicable today to a lot of the things that I know I need to get done, but I'm my biggest, and it's like I'm my biggest obstacle. So when I do receive those messages, it's like encouraging and telling me like, all right, you've chosen the right path. This is where you're supposed to be at. If you're impacting one person's life, it's big, because you never know what kind of impact that person is having on other people's lives.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So true.
So, what has been the most rewarding aspect of your journey as an author and creative coach?
Yeah, I think, meeting readers and getting to hear some of these stories like, that we just talked about, that's
Yeah,
definitely huge. And then just as I've been able to, meet new writers and help them, and even established writers who, want to be part of a community, and just the support, I think, that we can all give each other, regardless of who's published, who's not, all of that. I think that for me is the biggest thing, because it is really lonely to write and, be in your own head all day. I'm already always in my own head, never mind like when I'm writing. So having people to do it with and talk to about it and cheer you on has definitely, and being able to do that for others is just incredible.
yeah, I feel you on that. It's being able to make an impact like that is it's an amazing feeling, and it I when I first started podcasting, I was 44 years old. I've been doing it for 4 years now. I just turned 48 in July, and prior to that, I was like, I didn't have a purpose. I didn't know my purpose in life. I didn't know what I was like, because I have a good paying job. I have a beautiful wife, beautiful grandkids. Um, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't know what was my purpose. And then when I finally started podcasting, it was like, okay,
Mm.
this is I love this feeling. I love being able to do this. I'm like, all right, now what is this? Like what am I supposed to do with this? And being able to build this platform and just see the growth in the 4 years, it's been amazing.
That's awesome. And happy belated birthday.
Thank you. So, what future projects or series do you have in the works, and what can readers expect from Liz and or Cate Conte?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. So I have a new Cat Cafe book launching on August 20th. It's called Shock and Paw. It's book 8 in the series. It takes place around Christmas time. So if you're feeling really hot right now, you should grab the book, because it's all about winter and it'll be able to put you in a colder mindset. And then I have, I mentioned my class, my master class that's launching also around the same time. So I'm excited about that. And then I'm working on Cat Cafe Book 9 right now. It does not have a title yet, but the gang is leaving Daybreak Island and going to Provincetown for a cat literary festival. So there should be a lot of shenanigans happening there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's interesting. All right, but this has been wonderful. I've had a great time chatting with you.
Thank you so
Um,
much. Me too.
I appreciate you being a guest, and like I said, I want to hold the fact that you're from Boston against you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, it's a running joke with me and my friends. Because I'm a Brooklyn boy, born and raised, but it's not that I dislike the city of Boston. It's more the Red Sox.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
It's more of a sports thing
I
with me.
know.
so so it, so it's fun. I have a great time with it with some of the jokes that we have. But
Yeah.
I
Sports
appreciate.
aside, Boston's a great city.
Oh no, I actually studied outside of Boston in Newton Center. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, it's a great city if you like Boston. No, but thank you so much for being a guest. Now is the time where you get the solo screen, and you get to plug away. Let everybody know where they can find you, where they can get the books, everything.
Thank you so much. You can find me at cateconte.com. That's CateConte.com. You can find all my books there. You can also find a wait list to sign up for my class that's coming out, and also a link to my membership site. So looking forward to seeing you there.
All right. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank
Don't
you.
leave just yet. Let me close out the show and we'll chat a little bit off the air. But thank you again for being such a wonderful guest. I had a great time chatting with you. I'm actually gonna look. I'm not a cozy mystery guy, but I'm gonna check them out and give them a try.
Awesome. That makes me happy. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's all mine. All right, another great episode is in the can. Shout out to everybody who tuned in live, left a like. What's up, Ben Selleriff the third? My boy Corrado, I saw that you stopped by. Greatly appreciate it. As always, big shout out to my Real Wise fam, Poppy J, Brandy J. Love you guys. Shout out to the boss lady. Love you and appreciate you. And as always, a big shout out to our guests for being such a wonderful guest. And to all the essential workers out there, God bless you. Be safe. You know, your boy Wise does it. Peace out.